say Irish type.
Yeah.
This lady is not only generous and warm and absolutely what we've always admired and received so well from her screen activities, and we're going to refer to a lot of that tonight and review some of the association with our present. And you're blessed with all of these wonderful things.
My first job when I was a little girl was on radio.
Is that right?
Yes, when the programs were a little short and they had to fill in till the next one started. This was in Dublin. That was my job, was to talk about anything I wanted to talk about, just as long as we didn't have an empty space on the TV.
Well, how old were you at that time, Maureen?
I was about 8.
8. Now remember, she was talented from the word go. She comes from a talented family. Her mother was a wonderful contralto. Operatic contralto. And all of this permeated through the family. The dad was an entrepreneur and the part owner of a soccer team.
Soccer, yeah.
And she prophesied, because she was so athletically inclined, she prophesied that it would be a good thing for her father to become interested in female soccer. And he said,
no. No. So that wasn't for a lady.
But see where we are today, and you were right in there. That athleticism that we speak of now is the thing that I think just very recently here, McClintock was on TV, and if you'll remember, the sequence requires a great deal of physical running through about, maybe 8, 9 minutes, maybe more, in that sequence in the film with Duke Wayne right in back of her, and she did her own running and jumping.
Oh, yes, and we did.
You tell the story.
We did everything in the film because, it was kind of like a competition between us to see who'd give in first. And we never did. But we did the fall in the mud, both of us. We did all of the other stunts. I did the fall off the top of the ladder into the horse trough. The studio has to get insurance because if anything happens to you, you can't finish the film, and they're out millions and millions of dollars, and they'll never forgive you for that. But all the wonderful stuntmen in the picture business really, really took care of me. You can't imagine how wonderful they were. Unfortunately, most of those people are deceased now, and I really do miss them. But that fall, there are so many stunts in that picture, and if you have the patience, I'll tell you about some of them. The fall off the top of the ladder, where I climbed the ladder, and then the ladder went backwards, and I fell backwards into the water trough. The stuntman every day used to say to me, when you get to the top of the ladder, how do you hold the top rung? And I'd say, that way. Why? Because if I hold it that way, my elbows will be out and I'll break my arms as I fall. Because a water trough is only that wide. And every 15 minutes they'd come, one of them would say to me, how do you hold the ladder? How do you hold the ladder? So that you're brainwashed. And when I went up that ladder, I did that. I didn't do that, that's normal. But I did that, which I was supposed to do. And we only did the stunt once. They don't like you to do it more than once when it's dangerous, because they think, well, maybe it won't be so lucky after that. But it was wonderful. You know, I was a tomboy, so I had a great joy in doing all of those things. And in the running from Duke, you know, where he caught me and eventually walloped me on the behind, a woman, an old lady, was there in Arizona, and she stopped me and she said, tell me, miss, she said, is he paying you by the mile? I said, no, no way. But it was wonderful, and the fall, do you mind if I use a dirty word? It's not sexy dirty, it's just...
It's not 11 o'clock yet, but go ahead.
When we did the fall backwards and slid down into the mud, let me tell you, it was cold. Oh, and when you do that kind of a scene where your clothes are all dirtied up, they can't do a second take because time is money. And to do a second take, they have to take all your clothes off, they have to wash them, they have to wash you, they have to wash your hair, they have to put on a new makeup, and that takes hours just to do a second take. So you better do it right in the first take, or God help you. But anyway, when Duke and I did it, it was a bitterly, bitterly cold day. Even though there was sun shining, it was terribly cold. And we're standing there and shivering. And one of the men on the company, thinking he was, you know, being good to us, he put a blanket around Duke and a blanket around me. And that mud is, so you slide, has what the filler in chocolate is in the mud, so that you won't hit the mud and stick. You'll hit the mud and keep sliding, which we had to do. And when he put those blankets around us, that mud was all over us. If you remember, it was on my head and my face and everything. And in the cold wind, the blanket pressed that awful stuff into your skin. And it was absolutely awful. And Duke and I are standing there, and the wind is going in the front and out the back. And I turned to Duke, and I said, "Good God, Duke," I said, "this is like bird shit." Wait a minute. Now you have to hear what he said. He said, "What do you mean? Snot." And let me tell you, that we stood like this. We wouldn't even touch ourselves. But you know, it was true. That's what because it was slimy. It was awful.
You know that they have the connections with your childhood because you went right on into the Abbey plays in your teens, and that's tough to be accepted.
14.
Looks to me like I got a thunderstorm going on here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this works, but maybe if I sit very still, it won't bite me. But anyhow, the point I want to have the folks bear with us in, and you tell the story, is when you were discovered by Charles Lawton, because he indeed was the lever, or the leavening, I guess the both, that started your career. This was no starlet. This began as a star, and this lady went on and maintained that top.
No, the first movie I made, I was
That's why you
the,
know
I was
how to
the
hold a
leading
ladder.
lady.
That's why you knew how to hold a ladder.
No, I knew it because the stuntman taught me. You want this?
Why want you to tell them about Charles Lawton and that marvelous story of the audition that you and Pummer, Eric Pummer, the direction maven, and he did the same thing in agreement with Lawton. But listen to how she failed but succeeded at the same time.
Well, I was asked to go from Dublin, where I was born, to England to make a screen test. So I was underage, and I had to have a senior member of my family with me, and my mother went with me. And I went out to the studio, Elstree Studio in England, to make this test. And I was thinking over, I think I said the other day that I was 18, I wasn't, I was 16. And they put a gold lame dress on me. And it had pleated things here, so when you lifted your arm, you looked like you had gold wings. And it was absolutely the most awful looking thing you ever saw. And they put a makeup on me that looked like Mata Hari. I don't know if any of you are old enough to know who Mata Hari was. And I had to go down on the set, and then the director, there was a table there with a phone on it. And the director said, walk in, pick up the phone, change your mind, hang it up, leave, come back, do that again 3 or 4 times, then come back in, pick it up, and get mad, and slam it down, and walk off. And I thought, my God, that's a movie test. Because don't forget, I was in the theatre. I was raised in the theatre. And I thought I'd better get back to Dublin as fast as I can, because I'd been given at the Abbey Theatre my first leading role. And that to me was, the most wonderful thing that could happen to anybody, even today. And somehow or other, in the theatrical profession, before you know it, you have an agent. You don't know why, or where they come from, or how you get them, but suddenly you have an agent. And the agent said, well, before you go back to Ireland, there's somebody I'd like you to meet. And please go with me this afternoon. So my mother and I went with the agent, and the person they wanted me to meet was Erich Pommer and Charles Laughton. Well, I was such a great fan of Charles Laughton's, and on top of everything else, he was half Irish, so that took care of it. And sitting there chatting, and Laughton handed me a script, and he said, would you read some lines? And when you're that age, you're very sure of yourself, very cocky and very smart, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's pretty good. I was. And I said, well, Mr. Laughton, I know nothing about your script, and I couldn't possibly do myself justice and read it. But if you let me take it away with me, I will wait till tomorrow before I go back to Ireland, and I'll come back tomorrow and read for you. And he said, oh, that's all right, that's all right. And I go, fine, I'm going back to Ireland. And then he asked, was there any film on me? Well, there was this film I had just shot that afternoon. And this he tells, and he told the story on television. It's not my version of the story. He said he went out to the studio to see this film. He said it was the most hideous, horrible thing he ever saw in his life. And he thought, good God, how could I possibly have seen anything in that young lady? So he got back in his car and drove back into London. And he said that as the journey progressed, he could only remember my eyes. And when he got into London, he called his partner, Erich Pommer, and he said, she's marvelous. She's wonderful. I think we should sign her. And he said, you better go out and see the film. So Pommer, late at night, got into the car and drove out to the studio to see this magnificent film. And he had the same reaction. He thought it was the most horrible thing he ever saw. And the girl was absolutely awful. And how could Charles be possibly interested in her? So he got back into his car and drove back into London. And the same thing happened to him. And when he arrived in London, he met Charles and he said, you're absolutely right, she's fabulous, let's sign her. And they did. When I got back to Ireland, there was a contract for 7 years waiting in the house in Ireland. And actually, it had to have a witness, and our parish priest came on his bicycle and was the co-signer of the contract. And then later I went to London, and when I was going on 18, I made Jamaica Inn, the first movie with Laughton, and it was Charles Laughton and Maureen O'Hara. Only they changed my name as Maureen Fitzsimons. Not Fitzsimmons, Fitzsimons. And Laughton said, we've got to change your name. We have to do something. We said, nobody'll ever get Fitzsimons right. They'll call you Sid Simmons, Fitzsimmons, they'll call you everything but the right name. But my name always was Maureen. And he said, you can be Maureen O'Mara or Maureen O'Hara. I said, neither one. I like my name, and I'm proud of it, and I want to stay with my name. And he said, very well, then your name is Maureen O'Hara. And so I have been ever since. At the beginning of the picture, we were into it a few weeks, and war broke out. That was war in Europe, not Pearl Harbor. And none of us ever went back. The United States put up with us and kept us.
Which was a very fortunate break. Now you went from that movie to This Land of
No. From that movie I went to How Green Was My Valley.
How Green Was My Valley.
I made 59 movies in all. And I'm proud of most of them, not all, but most.
Well, you have a right to be. And they're nice to look at even if they're not what you'd like to be calling classics. So it doesn't make any difference.
Well, wait a minute. I had, as classics, How Green Was My Valley, Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Parent Trap, The Quiet Man. Oh, we need that to
Well,
last.
we were getting to that. I wanted to get to that because I want you to continue with Duke Wayne and your association.
Yeah, but
there.
Spencer's Mountain with Henry Fonda was that was a tremendous box office movie. And then The Parent Trap, and
Miracle.
McClintock.
This time of the year, The Miracle of 34.
And they were all classics. There was a wonderful old star, Ronald Coleman. And I was complaining one day to him about this script I had to do, and I thought that it was awful. And I thought, how can I say those words? How can I say those lines? It's so bad. It's badly written. And he said to me, he said, look here, Maureen, if you can say at the end of your career that one in every 15 movies you made you were proud of, he said, consider yourself very lucky.
Good for Ronald
So
Coleman.
I was proud of a lot more than 15.
So you went from The Quiet Man with Duke Wayne, which was fantastic. And there must be some other memories that hook you into that because you did how many pictures with Duke?
5.
5 altogether.
But when John Ford, I was making a picture called Spanish Main with Paul Henry. Gosh, my memory is pretty good. And when Ford came to the studio to see me, and I didn't know, and the second in command at RKO was John Joseph Nolan. And he came down on the set and he said, Maureen, John Ford came to see you, but he was in his usual messy old clothes and my father's old felt hat, and there was a new young policeman on the gate. And you have to have permission to go into a studio. You can't just walk in. And the poor policeman thought, this awful looking old man, he can't be John Ford and he can't have permission to come in here, and he wouldn't let him into the studio. Well, Ford went home and he was furious, because he was bad-tempered, believe me. And he called Joseph Nolan and let him have it. And Nolan came down on the set and he said, Maureen, John Ford just came here to see you, and the young policeman on the gate wouldn't let him in, and he's livid. Would you please call him and calm him down and tell him that if he'll come back tomorrow, we'll put a red carpet from the gate to the set you're working on, and he can drive on the red carpet and come in to see you. Well, I think the idea of driving over a red carpet tickled his fancy. And he did come back the next day, and he did drive over the red carpet, and he came to the set. And what he had come to the studio for, and this was 1944, was to have a shake hand agreement with me that I would make The Quiet Man. And the director was the witness. Ford stated why he was there. I stated that I would accept it, and we shook hands, and the witness was the director of Spanish Main, and that made it a legal contract. Well, from 1944 to 1951, it took us to raise the money to make The Quiet Man. RKO turned it down, Fox turned it down, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer turned it down, and they all said it was a silly, stupid little Irish story and would never make a penny.
Yeah.
And the years went by from 44, kept going. And Duke and I used to tease him and say, look, if you don't hurry up and raise the money and make the movie, Duke will be playing McLaughlin's role, and I'll be playing the widow woman, because we'll be so old. And finally, it was Duke. You read so many stories about this, and they're all wrong. Duke said, please, Pappy, as we called Ford, let me take it to Old Man Yates. And that was the head of Republic Studios, a studio that just made westerns, 10-day movies. It wasn't a big, high-class studio. And Ford said, okay, take it to him, even though that was a step down for John Ford to go to Republic Studios, a little Western studio. So he took it to, Duke took it to Herbie Yates. Herbie Yates read it and he said, silly, stupid little Irish story, it'll never make a penny, it'll never be any good, but, and that was the magic word. He said, if the same director, the same producer, the same cast make me a Western first, on which I will make my money, I'll finance it. And we made Rio Grande to raise the money to make a Quiet Man. Things weren't that easy then, and we didn't get paid very much money, not like today. I'm sorry, I think the salaries that are paid today are wrong, totally wrong. Duke was paid for The Quiet Man, and no residuals, $100,000. I was paid $75,000. Well, in 1951, that was a lot of money, and we were very happy to be paid that kind of money. But today, it's, I don't know, it strikes me wrong. It gives me the shivers. What? I agree. But anyway, we eventually made The Quiet Man, and it was like a family affair. My brother played the head of the IRA, and he was a barrister, which has to do with like a lawyer here. And he was the lawyer he did all the contracts and everything, but he also acted in the picture. My young brother played the young priest. Barry Fitzgerald's brother played the Protestant minister, Arthur Shields. John Wayne's kids were the 4 kids on the cart at the horse race when my hat was left on the pole. Those were Duke's kids. And Andy McLaughlin was the second assistant, and that was Victor McLaughlin's son. And John Ford's brother, who in the early silent days was a big star, played the old man that was dying in bed, and they were reading from the Bible to him, and he heard that Mary Kate was being dragged home, and he was out of that bed because he wanted to see what happened. Oh yeah, but we made Rio Grande first.
Made Rio Grande.
Yeah, we had to make that to raise the money.
Then you did
Quiet Man. Then we did McClintock. We did Wings of Eagles. We did Big Jake.
Oh, yeah.
We did, 5 of them.
5 altogether.
Yeah, but I was lucky with the leading men I worked with, and I'm sorry to say they're all deceased. And I'm lucky to be here. I don't know why I'm here, but that they're gone. But Jimmy Stewart, Tyrone Power,
John Wayne.
Paul, what was the wonderful actor that was in Spencer's Mountain? Henry Fonda. All of them, I worked many times with every one of them, and I've always been very proud of the fact that when they were told it was me again, that they didn't say, oh God, not that woman. They were happy.
That's great.
What recall with us, if you will, and share, you made a picture with Errol Flynn?
Yes, just one.
One, just one.
Yeah, but they used to say that I outfenced Flynn. No, I was a fine fencer. I was very good at judo. I could play soccer. I could use a bullwhip, an American bullwhip and an Australian bullwhip. I learned both. But with the American bullwhip, if you were standing there and had a cigarette in your mouth, I was able to take it out in the air and catch it.
All right.
Go back a little bit. Here we have to slide back a little bit and just hook up that association with Charlie Blair.
Yep.
And if you don't mind, just pick it up from there, because that is the beginning of an association that led to your marriage and staying away from the screen for
19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
I quit. And I didn't come back until
You know, this
after he
makes
was
us
killed.
think, all of us frustrated Red Sox fans, if it hadn't been 2 wars, what Ted Williams might have done. See? And if you hadn't stopped 19 years, no telling how many pictures you would have made that are all the same quality and absolutely wonderful.
Well, you don't know, because
Yeah.
the talent in the picture business to me seemed to get less. Not the talent was there, but the demands of those talent and what they should do and everything else.
You were never tempted to go back in that period, right?
No, with Charlie Blair, no. He was worth giving it all up. He was the finest and most wonderful man in the whole world, in every way, in his duty and respect and love for his country, and his donations through his military service and his commercial airline service to the United States.
Well,
Oh, that's great.
he was a historic and storybook pilot, there's no question about that. And I can understand the situation, but of course both of you by this time had taken the big ship, as the folks have seen tonight in the story, and gone to the Antilles, and you were utilizing it there and living your lives there when unfortunate tragedy struck and Charlie was taken from you. Now, from there, you became the first woman CEO
The first lady in the United States of America to be the chief executive officer or president of a commercial.
You were already,
airline.
though, editing and writing
Yes.
in a
Yes.
magazine from the...
Yes, Charlie thought that I'd get too fidgety not working in the picture business, and he bought the Virgin Islander magazine to make me work, and I had to write an article every month for the magazine, and I published it in the Caribbean. And then after Charlie was killed, I sold the magazine to USA Today.
Oh,
So that's a very nice publisher and a very nice person to have bought it. And I continued to work for, not for USA Today, but for the magazine in the Caribbean. And now if you can find them, they're collector's items. So if you know anybody has any, grab them quick.
Speaking of collector's items, I know all of you will join me in recalling something that you may on your own recall, but my good luck started with Maureen O'Hara, and she would never remember this because she was doing a worldwide tour, I'm sure at that time, or at least nationally, promoting her capability to sing, which was very strong from the time she was an early child star, and she had a wonderful voice. And she finally made that come true, and this is Bob Ellsworth's personal collection.
oh, look at
It happened in the early 60s when the A&R, that's the artist and representative guy from Columbia, happened to come by one night, and guess who was on duty because he had a night shift for some reason, I don't remember. But what happened was, in she walks, very wonderful, just to meet her. And this was Maureen O'Hara sings her favorite Irish songs, promoting this album.
It's a good album, even if I say so myself.
You're darn right it
Yes.
is.
No, 90% of the songs on it are very old and were taught to me by my mother and my father, and one of them was taught to me by an old man on a bus. And they're not the stuff that you hear today and that they say are Irish songs, no. And there's one on there, if any of you can get it. I believe you can still find it somewhere, but it's expensive to buy. And there's one song on there called Nora Lee. And when you listen to it, you say, wait a minute, that's a song that Elvis Presley sang, called Love Me Tender, Love Me True. Well, the melody is the Irish melody, but the new words aren't. But old melodies go out of ownership, you know, the registration. And if anybody hears a wonderful melody and they find it's not registered and you quick go and register it, it becomes yours. And obviously that's what happened with Nora Lee. And it became the property of not Elvis himself, but his managers and his music company and everything. And they just put new words to it. So it kind of it hurts me a little bit when I hear it with the words that don't belong to it, because Nora Lee, the words are gorgeous.
Well, we used to play selections from that album on WTIC radio.
You did?
Yeah, well, we had a mixture in those days of talk and music,
Yep.
which has been banned from the airwaves since then. We just talk
Why?
now. Well, people just talk now. That's why I don't work there anymore. I couldn't talk, so I just...
What was wrong? What was wrong with the music? Talk
No,
is more dangerous.
Exactly, but the formats have changed, and that was it. But from this, it is noted there, and you did your own jacket cover on this, that you went to Broadway in Christine. That was the name. Would you?
That's out again. You can buy that now, anywhere. The album of Christine, which was the Broadway show, and we didn't make it. But the music is Fane and Webster, which is magnificent music. But the show, we had rotten producers, and they didn't like the old-fashioned wonderful story that was the show, and they kept changing it, which was a terrible mistake. Are we supposed to shut up? I can't put them together. Or maybe they can't put together and I just put them on one side.
Where'd you learn all those good ad-libs like at some point?
You last night on TV. I
Yeah.
watched the quiet in the end of the
Let's
last
walk
one.
over there and see if we can do something.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You never talk. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, but the thing, Ron and I brother, the problem is, we got asked to come when they would have a tornado, I was out in the field taking pictures. And I and General Freund, governor called me, you're going with us around in the morning. And this guy,
my travel agent. Patrick, who'd you just meet?
What do you think?
Tell me.
Maureen O'Hara.
Was she nice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever brought the folks here. Next time they come out, we should bring them out.
Yeah, they'd enjoy this. Ron definitely would enjoy this.
Yeah, I'm most sure they haven't been out here.
This is their plane that was restored.